Right then, colleagues, can we make a start? And welcome to the meeting, and welcome to the people at the back there from the Older Persons Forum and whoever is sat at the back there to listen to the meeting. I've got to go on the first substantive item, and I think Lewis is going to chair it. But anyway, there's an attendance register going round. There's no apologies for absence. There's a number of declarations of interest. Linda, do you want to go through them now initially?
Yes. Thank you, Leader. There are a number of interests. Even though they will be interests that have been declared previously, the code doesn't allow us to have standing items, so we have to go through it each time. I'll have had discussions with members beforehand, so I think the most helpful way is if I go through item by item, and at the end of each item I'll ask those members I've referred to say agreed. So if I start with item 7, that's the 21st Century Schools. That is the Fairwater and Llantarnam school reorganisation. There'll be several interests here. A couple of the interests will be prejudicial, and when I mention that, that interest means the member has to go outside and can't take part in the decision. So if we start with the leader has a personal prejudicial interest as he lives opposite one of the school entrances. The Deputy Leader has a personal interest as a council-appointed trustee of the Leisure Centre, which has a lease on Fairwater Leisure Centre, the Leisure Trust. Councillor Clark, that's Councillor Richard Clark, has a personal interest as a local authority-appointed governor of Crossacaileog School, which is also affected. Councillor Hunt is a local authority-appointed governor of Llantarnam School, so a personal interest there, as is Councillor Daniels. If I can ask those members referred to say you're agreed to those interests being declared?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. If I go on to item 8, this is the new school proposal, and this is Blenheim Road, Llantarnam Primary and Ysgol Panteg. Councillor Gwynaira Clark, you have a granddaughter working at Ysgol Panteg, and that means that's a prejudicial interest in relation to that item. You're agreed there. Then item 9, this is the Viable and Vibrant Places, the grant offer of funding. The Deputy Leader is the trustee of Pontypool Development Trust. That is a prejudicial interest in this item, Deputy Leader. And then Councillor Richard Clark, you have a personal interest as you're a council-appointed board member of Bronavon, who would be a partner, RSL. Are you both agreed on those interests? Thank you. Then we have on item 10 the SRS public update. Although that's an update only on the public activities of the SRS for transparency and because it may also be mentioned, the leader has a personal interest only as you're a council-appointed director of the trading company, the SRS BS Limited. And Councillor Hunt, although you're actually presenting the report for the formalities of the code, you have a personal interest in that you're the formally appointed representative on the SRS Public Board. Are you both agreed on those interests? Thank you. And I think that's probably the last one now. I don't think there are any more interests, but if members have any queries or they occur as we go through, please ask for advice or otherwise declare. Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Right, thanks for that. Now then, item 4 then is the minutes of the 8th of July. I'll take you through that. Page 1, 2, 3. These pages are not numbered. 4, 5. Oh, they are now. 6, 11 actually. 12. 13, 14. That's it. That's all agreed, those minutes, please show. Thanks so much for that. Now then, on to the minutes of the item 5, which is minutes of the meeting of the 15th of July, page 15. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. That's it, 21. All agree those minutes, please show. Thanks very much for that. Item 6 now then is the action sheet, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. The action sheet is there for information unless members have any questions.
Any questions on the action sheet? If not, then I can now move into item 7, but I shall be leaving and Lewis Jones.
Okay, this is 21st Century Schools. It's a full business case for Phase 2B, secondary school reorganisation in Cumbraen. Dermot, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is twofold. It is to seek approval for the full business case, which is attached as an appendix to this paper, to the Welsh Government. That's seeking the additional funding that we need, in addition to the £3 million that we're also looking for approval to release the funding that we currently have within Torvine's own coffers to enable us to get on with the build as quickly as possible, with the refurbishment as quickly as possible. In short, that is really the crux of the paper. We clearly want to get on now with the new head teacher, Helen Coulson, who's been recently appointed, in designing the refurbishment of the existing site. That work is continuing in terms of the initial design work, and we need to proceed as quickly as possible. So I'm really going to stop there, Chair, and just ask if there's any questions.
Any questions to Dermot? No?
Chair, that really is the decision to be taken. Can we proceed with a full business case, and can we also then have a release of the £3 million capital? Okay.
Everybody happy with that? No questions at all? Okay.
How far will this money go towards bringing the existing Fairwater infrastructure up to an energy efficient standard?
That's a really good question, and I'm looking to my colleague to come and help answer that for me. The answer is I'm not sure. Sorry, Chair.
Get there eventually. Sorry about that. It's undoubtedly my fault. With new builds, we have to get to what they call the BREEAM standard, which includes aspects of energy efficiency. With remodelling, you're not required to get to the same level of excellence as for new builds. So there are considerable works going on or planned with the investment that you've just been asked to give permission for, which will include heating plant, will include improvements to roofs, will include improvements to windows, so it will make improvements, and what we have to do as part of the project is quantify those improvements, and they can be reported back at the end.
Okay, David. Dave, do you wish to say anything on this?
Trying to keep the waterfall off the chief executive. I would only say this in terms of the substantive issue here. I would support it wholeheartedly because we need to advance with some urgency. The new school configuration is to be up and running for September 2015, and as much work as we can do between now and then we need to do, because it feeds into the whole notion of a well-integrated start. It would be unconscionable to delay this any further than is absolutely necessary, and I would support wholeheartedly a request to release this monies and let us get on with the work.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Anthony?
Very much concur with Councillor Yole's points there. As part of the question raised by Councillor Daniels, I've read recently about some efforts that are being made to install solar panels on the roofs of new and refurbished schools to try and save the schools money and generate green electricity. are we able to look into that both on this school and the other schools that we're building and remodelling in the coming years?
Whenever we're looking at significant refurbishment or indeed new builds, we look at the green technologies that exist as part of the overall package. It is something that comes down to cost sometimes, and there's a trade-off sometimes between those sorts of technologies and the available sums to do the work that needs to be carried out. But as I say, it's something that is very uppermost in Welsh Government's overall interests when you're carrying out capital investment works, and we have to satisfy them that we've done what we can. If you're talking about solar panels, if you're talking about ground source heating, yes, they will be looked at, but I wouldn't like to give any guarantee that they will be included in every package, because it very much depends on what you're doing on a particular site. And it's something that, with this particular project, we'll need to talk to the contractor together, with colleagues in neighbourhood services, to make sure that we get the very best out of the investment that the Council is going to put into this, and Welsh Government is too.
Happy with that? Everybody in agreement? We move to the vote. There's 2 recommendations. Everybody in favour? Okay. Now go to the next item as soon as the leader's in.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair, as you say, this report's about considering the outcomes of the consultations on each of the 3 schools. Members have had a copy of the consultation responses in the members' library, and that's again attached to the report. We've had a number of responses to each, and the answers that we've given in response to those consultations are contained in the consultation document. Recommendations here really is that we need to proceed to the statutory notices for the new schools as quickly as possible, and the times for those are given again in 12.1. Chair, I don't know if it's worthwhile if members would like to go through each of the consultations in turn to see if there are any issues arising, but clearly the overall proposal is that we get on again with the build process as quickly as possible. So I don't know if you want to go through each of the consultations or how you'd like to. Are there any particular issues arising?
Yes.
Okay. If I can find the right page now. So in terms of the consultation for Blenheim Road, there were 2 issues particularly coming from members of the public. One was around a perception that there was a current public access route through the site. As you can see from the response, that's not the case. There are no registered public rights-of-way, and that's because they were all extinguished back in June 2007. So there is some misconception in the public's mind that there may be some access sites. There aren't. So that it won't be an impediment to the design on the site. If new houses are to be built, will the new school be big enough? And clearly, we intended that the original submission was for a 420 build. We're going to look at the design very carefully to make sure that if we can, in terms of the flexibility of that design, we can expand the school in due course, although we're not expecting that we'll need that demand or that demand will be there in the first instance. So we're very confident the school will be fit for purpose and will be of the right size. Okay. Obviously, yeah.
Cabinet report, you said 3 issues and you've raised 2 of them, and the other one was playing fields.
Sorry, Richard. The school is being designed and built to the current standards in terms of requirements of play areas, and we're confident that we'll be able to meet that standard. Sorry, I missed that one at the top. Clearly, there's also a consultation with children and young people as well. and that was run for us by the Play Service. Group discussion was undertaken on the hopes and fears of the children moving to a different school. Many topics were discussed during that process, and we'll be continuing to work with the Play Service and with children and young people through the Schools Council as we go through the design process to make sure that the issues that children and young people have raised through each of the schools are listened to and addressed, and that young people feel they've got a voice in the design process. Okay. In terms of I'm sorry, those are listed then for you on page 166 and 167, and some lovely drawings as well, and young people's ideas. In terms of Luntarnum, there were a couple of particular issues that go back to previous infrastructure on the Luntarnum community site when it was called Oakfield, and the first of those is the potential location of a special needs resource space. Now, in terms of the current arrangements, Luntarnum Community Primary technically still has a resource base for children with emotional and behavioural difficulties registered to it. That's never been removed, so that used to be called Oakfield SRB for children with EBD, or emotional and behavioural difficulties. That resource base hasn't been in operation for 4 or 5 years now, so there have been no staff and no children there, although technically it's still, as I say, on the books, so to speak. To remove that, we'd have to have gone through a different statutory consultation process to actually remove that and deregister it with Welsh Government. We haven't made a decision formally about the removal of that, and that still is technically on the books, as I say. There will be a further paper coming to review and scrutiny in Cabinet in due course, looking at reforms of our additional learning needs provision. And one of the things that we will be going out to the community and consulting on shortly is the recreation of a Key Stage 2, a primary level resource base for children with emotional and behavioural difficulties. So at the moment, what we're saying is that registration is still there. We have no intention at the moment to actually build a resource base on the new site, but we know that we have to go out to consultation on that issue in time for us to do something with the design if needs be. Sorry, that's quite a long answer, but I hope that's clear. It's maybe worth pausing just there, Chair, just to make sure everyone is comfortable with that answer on that particular point.
With the Ysgol Panteg site, will there be regular sort of communications as we go into sort of the design and the build stage to ensure that the views of the community? I know there's a lot of people on the new housing estates either side of the school who are keen to talk about whether any community use can be used in the school and any playing fields it has.
We're getting to the really exciting stage of 21st century schools now, where we actually start to build some real assets, and this is a bit where we also start to get clarity over what's going to be developed and how it might be used in the future. There are formal processes to go through in terms of planning permissions. There are informal processes to go through, as you say, to communicate with the community at large, to start to work up the practical aspect of operating these schools. So in short, yes, we need not just with Ysgol Panteg, but with all of the major projects that we do. So the other two primary schools in this paper and the Cwmbran High issue that you considered before this item, to make sure that we get information out there, and we'll be using the media to do that by and large. It's now that we get the clarity to be able to actually make people see and start to feel what we're talking about. Up to this date, it's been numbers, it's been technical information that it's not always easy to get your head around. So yeah, we're looking forward to this phase.
Just to add that, the last point in that particular schools consultation was around additional learning needs as well. Clearly, in terms of the design for all three buildings, we'll make sure that we design out any difficulties that we know we have with some of our existing schools estate, particularly for children who've got sensory or physical impairment. And we'll also be looking to make sure that those new designs are as inclusive as possible and ensure that young people can be educated in their local mainstream school without having to travel somewhere else. So we'll take those opportunities as well.
Thank you, Dermot. Anybody else raise any questions? No? No officers want to? Yeah.
So, I'm using paper, Chair, so I should be using it electronically, shouldn't I? Thank you. So, really, the recommendations to members are to note the outcome of the consultation exercise and agree to go ahead, publish the statutory notice to establish new schools for Lantarnum Community Primary and Iscle Panteg with effect from the 1st of September 2016. Proceed with the proposals to replace Blenheim Road Community School on its existing site for September 2016. In the case of Lantarnum Community Primary School proposal, to agree to adjust catchment areas, which will mean, which will then allow all primary catchment areas in Cwmbran to be aligned with their partner secondary schools, and to receive a further report in November of this year, following the end of the statutory notice period, if objections to the proposals in relation to Lantarnum Community Primary School and Iscle Panteg are received, with a view to making a recommendation on how to proceed. It should be noted that if no objections are received during this period, local determination of the proposals will be made via a report to the Executive Member for Education.
Thank you for that, Dermot. You see the recommendations on, is it 156? Yeah. All agreed? Sure. Thanks so much. Thank you, Dermot. We're on now to item 9, which is the grant offer from Welsh Government for funding under the Vibrant and Viable Places programme. This is Christina. This is to seek approval to accept the separate grant, seek approval for the £8 million, and then to seek approval of a separate grant of £200,000 from BARG for the private rented sector loan scheme. The VIP is a large-scale, highly complex regeneration programme that will span the next 3 to 7 years. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Lydia. A wonderful introduction. Thank you. Yes, members are well rehearsed in terms of the background of VVP and how we've got to where we are. The purpose of this report, as the leader has outlined, is to seek approval to accept the terms and conditions of the grant offer that we've received from Welsh Government, which totals just over £8 million. That's divided into 2 areas, and that is approval in principle for £4.61 million in relation to canal side and alternative housing sites. And that is subject to further work being undertaken, and which will require a further decision by this Cabinet before presenting to the Minister for approval himself. And then the second part of the offer is authority to commit, so that is to spend £3.393 million in relation to projects in Pontypool, and also to carry out the required feasibility work for canal side and the housing sites. A further £200,000 for the private sector will be subject to a separate report to this Cabinet and will be awarded under a separate agreement. And that part of the programme will be administered by our colleagues in the Housing Department. So I suppose the question you may be asking yourselves now is, well, what happens next? We've had the award letter, and if members are minded to approve it, what happens next? With regards to canal side, that element of the programme, between now and Christmas we'll be carrying out feasibility work on how we can make that project happen. The outcome of those feasibility studies will come to this Cabinet, either just this side of Christmas or just the other side of Christmas, for further consideration before it's presented to the Minister. What Welsh Government have highlighted, though, is that around that element of the project is that if the feasibility studies show that a potential for any financial return that we can generate from the canal side element of the programme, from the LDP housing side of the programme, it can be utilised to bring the canal side programme forward. And what that means, we've had many discussions around the ability to deliver the canal side in the 3-year, well, the 2.5 years that is left in the VVP programme. If we're able to do that, that allows us much more time to develop that programme for canal side, which we all know is very complex and very detailed. So that's the canal side element of the programme in terms of what happens now. From a Pontypool perspective, we've now got the go-ahead to start to commit the money on Pontypool, and things will start to happen. But you won't find things happening on the ground very quickly, because this programme is underpinned by complex partnership arrangements, and we need to undertake all the necessary legal documentation and put all of that in place to ensure that all the partnership work that we take forward to deliver Pontypool is actually robust and protects the Council and the partners that it's working with. So in terms of the programme, it's large scale. It's of a scale that as a council we haven't delivered before. It's highly complex and it spans about the next 3 to 7 years. There are a number of significant risks associated with the projects, and they are detailed in this report and are mitigated. Some mitigation measures have been offered. But I suppose the main way we are looking to minimise the risk profile to the council is that we are looking to take a staged approach to this programme. So you will find that periodically and at key stages in this programme, I'll be bringing reports back to Cabinet to make decisions so that we are managing the risk associated with this programme. The private sector has a critical role to play, and it will require new partnership and delivery models for us. So, we are delving into new territory, but I'm working very closely with our legal colleagues in particular to develop these new forms of partnership arrangements. It's an ongoing project and programme, so it's likely to change as we continue and as we develop it further. But again, I'll be bringing reports back to Cabinet to cover off any changes. And so that is essentially the programme and what I'm asking approval for. If I can just refer to the recommendations right at the end of the report. Just playing with the technology moment. And the recommendations are at paragraph 12. Nearly there. Right. Okay. The recommendations are that Cabinet approves the grant offer from Welsh Government of just over £8 million. And for a programme of this scale, there will be a very formal project management structure and resource plan sat behind the delivery of this programme. And as part of that programme, we would welcome the input of members from Cabinet as part of the programme management structure. So as part of the recommendations, I'm seeking approval that Cabinet members are selected to sit on a VVP member liaison group. I'm also asking Cabinet to note that a further report regarding the £200,000 private rented sector loan scheme is presented under a separate Cabinet report to you. I'm also asking you to note the proposed programme management structure that is attached in the report, and also to note the need for further detailed work around Canalside and the Torfaen housing programme that will be undertaken and will be subject to a separate report that will come to this Cabinet prior to presenting to the Minister for approval. Thank you, Leader.
Right, thanks for that. Any comments?
Just to comment, I think that obviously all the recommendations are quite important, but I think the most important one is the recommendation 5 about the detailed work that needs to be undertaken now, because I'm concerned about the risk involved from both elements, not just the Pontypool element, but the Cwmbran element. And I think it's vitally important that we get on board as quickly as possible any partnerships that we need, any expertise that we need, because I understand that's contained within the grant anyway, in order to take this forward, because I don't believe that with officers of Torfaen's day jobs, they're not going to have that amount of energy to put into this project. And I'm concerned that we need to have that energy in order to make this succeed. So hopefully that will happen.
Anybody else? If not, all agreed? Sure. Thanks very much, Christina. We're moving now on to item 10. This is Matt and Anthony. Over to you, Matt. Sorry? Oh, where's Lewis Jones? Right. Here he comes. Never used to have this years ago, and he'd throw you out and call you back in.
Safe governance.
Right, carry on, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. It's great to be able to come and give such a positive update of the work the SRS has done the last 12 months. So I'll go through the key headlines. I won't go through the whole report line by line, and if there are any questions or any other headline points after that, then they're more than welcome. So the key headlines for the SRS 2013-14, an underspend of £191,000 against base budget, and that then contributes in towards the ongoing savings plan that we've got as part of the wider Torfaen savings work. 2013-14, we helped the partner organisations avoid spending money as well, and that's an important one because that number is actually bigger than the savings number. So whilst it's not a saving on base budget, it's a saving against money we would have had to spend if we'd done something individually as Torvine. So we've done the same for Monmouthshire, same for Gwent Police. There are collaborative systems and infrastructure that we've put in place that meant we've saved large amounts of money by doing things together, which I think is always an important point when you look back to why the SRS was originally set up. That's one of the really key important points that we always try to work to. SRS public projects are being delivered to drive savings out within the organisation as well as within the SRS-based budget. And point 5 as well on the highlights, we've reinvigorated the project board within Torvine. Richard Edmonds has done a lot of work with us, and we're putting systems in place to make sure that any work that we do always feeds up into the corporate plan priorities and that it always has a return on investment put against it so that we are contributing towards savings plans within the organisation as well. As part of the SRS public board work, we've now got a really strong, tight-knit SRS public board that's got a number of members on it there's Councillor Hunt-Sonia from Torvine, Councillor Murphy from Monmouthshire and Nigel Stevens in Gwent Police. And it's really picked back up where it left off, I guess. You know, we've got a good set of papers going to that board meeting every month. The discussions are more strategic than they were previously, kind of more operational it started to get into. So we've really refocused what the purpose of the SRS Public Board was and the things that it's doing going forward, which again for me is hugely positive. As part of the SRS Public Review work, there were 4 strands that came out of that, with one of those being the core services work. So we've redefined all the core services that the SRS provides, and at the Public Board at the end of this month, we'll be coming back with a number of commissioning documents from the organisations. So some of the comments you often get as part of the audit process with Peter Williams' team is you need to know exactly what you're getting for what you pay, what the performance is from that, and how you derive value from that at the end of the day. So we're working through all that, and we're coming up to closing that work now. Just a couple of notes on the end as well. We've been through Torvine scrutiny, which I think we ran for about 2.5 hours on the scrutiny meeting. The panel came up to visit the SRS, so it wasn't just us telling people what we think we do. They actually came up, they experienced our service desk facility, they asked staff questions, and they came back, and then we kind of filled in the gaps from what they learned when they came on the visit up to the SRS. That was a really positive experience, and some of the suggestions that came out of it will help us moving forward, and we'll be able to work with people off the scrutiny panel to help put things in place as well. And the final point on the Torvine members seminar that we held probably about 2 weeks ago now, all about how do we kind of redefine what ICT is for members and how do we change the working ways for members so that things become far simpler, slicker and quicker to do, and the device you get is the device that you actually want. So there's a key set of headlines there, and as I said, I won't go through the whole paper, but any questions on any of those points, I'm more than welcome to answer.
Right, anybody got any questions? Dave?
Second. I'm intrigued by the second bullet point here. The SRS help the partner organisations avoid spending money. How do you do that?
There's a couple of examples on the page overleaf. So I've tried to show the cost of the project that we were working on, if there were savings related to that project, and also cost avoidance. So if we look at we've got a couple of examples of underlying infrastructure of storage, so where our data lives as an organisation, and our telephone system. If we'd have done either of those projects as 3 individual organisations, the costs would have been far greater because we would have had a telephone system here, a telephone system here, and a telephone system here. Whereas if we've done that together, on the telephone example, I think we saved about 100,000 on the original purchase because we bought all of the core pieces together between Monmouthshire and Torvine. And then you almost, if you like, punch holes in networks to allow different organisations to access the same piece of equipment. So we're only buying one thing, whereas previously we would have ended up buying 3. You'll still have the same number of phones out in the organisation, the same number of bits of kit, but the core bit, which is the really expensive bit, and the work to implement it, that is just done once and bought once.
So there was consensus across the board on this. Everybody was buying into this. I think it wasn't a question of you going along with a big stick and saying you will make these savings. There was
No, definitely. I think if we go back to one of the original reasons the SRS was set up, it was about doing things together and trying not to have lots of everything. So we always go back to that. When we bring cabinet papers, when we take papers to the SRS board, our position, our de facto position is always that this has to be done together. And we will always put to the top of the list projects that are across multiple organisations rather than doing something individually. And that's often supported because the cost will be a lot cheaper doing things together rather than separately.
So you would say that the health of the partnership is pretty solid, pretty solid?
I would say so, and I think the telephone one is a recent one. It's within the last few months. So again, there is still very strong support for implementing things together as we go forward.
John?
Yeah, can I just say that also, you're talking about the telephony system that have improved in other areas as well, and benefited other people, like the schools, for instance. Yes. I mean, many of the schools now are on the same system. So we can ring even St Albans. I know I ring St Albans on the internal thing now, so that have benefited them sort of as far as cost effectiveness is concerned.
Definitely, and I think one of the real positives for me, probably the last 6 months, is quite a shift in organisations that were previously not part of SRS provision are now knocking our door and saying, can you provide us with this, can you provide us with that? And St Albans is a good one, a school that was previously got its own support or support brought in from outside, have now started to bring systems in internally, and the phone one is a great example, yeah.
Without repeating a lot of what Matt said, I'd like to welcome the report, and really I think it sort of the theme that it hits is that the desire to sort of hit the fundamentals, look at the first principles of why it's a good idea for us to have an SRS, and how we can do things better across the three organisations together than we could do separately. So the underspend in 3.1 is obviously a good thing, but as Matt said, the £350,000 that we've saved through not doing things 3 times across the 3 public sector organisations, I think does sort of show the benefits, and that's something that since I became a board member early in the year, and I've been to my first board meeting and meetings around it since, I was keen to sort of to push home. I think there's a good sort of team forming. Obviously, Councillor Murphy from Monmouthshire and Nigel Stevens, whilst being sort of different characters, having different areas of expertise. I think that's starting to work well together, and we're starting to sort of see the different opportunities for our organisations and how we can work together. The scrutiny process, sounded positive to me, and aligned with the seminar as well. I hope it's part of a strategy where we can keep members informed as much as possible, answer questions, and make sure that they can see, the logic of what's happening at the SRS and how we're working things through together.
Thanks for that. Anybody else? Yeah.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank the members of staff that give such support to the members here. I mean, the laptops, the systems we were working down, continually breaking down. But I've got to say, they're excellent. They come out at a drop of a hat. And I certainly appreciate all that they've done for me, and I'm sure the other members do. So I'd like you to carry that back to the staff.
The rest of you want to say? You all right? All right. I want to make a comment, obviously. First of all, I'm very pleased about the fact that Anthony Hunt is now on the board, and also there's a representative from Monmouthshire County Council. There is a misconception out there that the SRS actually belongs to Torvine. It doesn't belong to Torvine, and I need to make a couple of comments on that so that the public understand that. The SRS is run by a group of officers. The SRS is run by a third. Third belongs to Monmouth, and I think people need to understand that they have, there are not implications, but it belongs to them. Third belongs to the police, and a third belongs to Torvine. So it's run by a group of officers, has been run by a group of officers for the first 3 years of its life, and now, thankfully, we've got some public representatives on there. I'm sure we all wish it well. And I think people need to understand that. So it's run by 3 different groups from 3 different agencies, and it's covered by a memorandum of understanding. It's not a company Linda, you can confirm that. And for the first 3 years of its life, it was simply run by officers. We should welcome the fact that there are now public representatives and councillors on there, and we wish it well and hope that you earn a lot of money for us and for Monmouth and for the police. All agree with the report? Thanks so much. We're now on to the Welsh language, item 11, and this is Mark Dubler. Is it? No, it's not. Sorry, it's Vincent. You're giving me wrong information. Yeah, that's right. Go on. Sorry about that. Don't blame me, I'm reading off the sheet.
Bwrdd, thank you, Leader. I give my apologies first for Alan Vernon-Jones, who would have been presenting this report, but unfortunately is unwell at the moment. If I take you through what the purpose of the report is, it's simply to receive Cabinet's approval for this report, the annual monitoring report for 2013-14, to go forward to the Commissioner. You'll see that as an appendix to the main report. Unfortunately, the format that the Commissioner sets in terms of annual monitoring reports is actually quite clunky, but we have followed those guidelines. So apologies first if it doesn't seem too accessible, but we are actually following the rules by which we are told to report on different matters of our progress over the year. 2013-14 was quite a challenging year for the Council in terms of Welsh language. We'd noticed through complaints that there was increasing expectations upon the Council in terms of Welsh language service provision. It was actually quite a significant step change in terms of focus and attention that we had made on Welsh language. The amount of complaints that came in were so significant that we actually were in regular contact with the Welsh Language Commissioner, who perhaps would look at things in terms of numbers rather than actually the significance of each individual complaint. So I think it is quite important to remember, even though there were actually complaints around particular issues and there was an increase in numbers, these were often kind of small issues about minor failures in terms of what we should have done in terms of bilingualism within the Council. But it did draw the Commissioner's attention. Towards the end of last year, we were actually served with a investigation order where there was a complaint made about the pace by which our automated telephone system was put into place, and that the Welsh language version there was a small delay in that being implemented. The reason for that was often more related to actual technical issues and translation issues about bringing what is quite a modern piece of technology into place and wanting to test it first in English language. But I think the point was made by the Commissioner is that those tests should have happened at the same time and then been launched simultaneously. So that there were a number of recommendations that were made by the Commissioner that we've actually followed up on. And the complaint has now been satisfactorily concluded. It also resulted in additional resources being provided across the Council in order to improve our response. So we now have a newly appointed Welsh language translator who is an additional resource. So we have two Welsh language translators that will help us with the amount of translation that's coming through the system. There's an increase in preparedness and actually a degree of enthusiasm that's coming from officers and others across the Council about being able to improve our offer around Welsh language. So these things are not actually proven to be reluctant things, and doors to open. But in order to respond to that increased demand, we've now got an additional Welsh language translator. One of the other criticisms that was made of the council is our inability to provide Welsh language speakers at front of office, at a customer service level. We've explained that because of actually the dearth of actually Welsh language speakers who have a willingness or a readiness to actually work within those settings, that can be quite difficult to recruit. But I'm pleased to say that very recently customer services have been able to recruit a Welsh Welsh-speaking customer service officer. So that's an excellent bonus, and that was one of the recommendations that the Commissioner said that we should seek to do. It also talked about that the Torfaen website should actually be completely bilingual. And I think amongst other councils we would see that we are in a very respectable position where probably in the region of around 90% of our website is actually bilingual. That against other councils I really wouldn't, I'm really quite proud of that position. But the nature is that this is meant to be completely bilingual, and that's the challenges that we have in front of us. We also actually were able to have resources to allow for 2 customer service officers to improve their Welsh language speaking skills because they were actually Welsh learners, and that they would that they'd actually gone on an immersion course for 6 weeks, which they did during the summer. So they're now in a much stronger position. 2 other recommendations of the report that were that actually came from that investigation that are part of the monitoring report was that the establishment of an intranet site for Welsh language speakers. And we've actually now established that through a Yammer group, an employee group, that we will encourage Welsh language speakers to kind of get themselves known and work as a community to kind of promote Welsh language within the workplace. And the other issue is that that they brought up was actually relating to monitoring of third-party contracts through the procurement process. And we've agreed an arrangement with Andrew Maisie about sampling of the documentation and processes for those third-party organisations that we work with, and we do that on an annual basis. So that's where we are in terms of the annual monitoring report for last year. I think it's a confident and competent position. We do have some challenges ahead of us as far as the future standards are concerned, which will mean a step change in expectations that we have been signalled that will go right across Wales. However, the negotiation is on an individual basis, that the order that is made, a compliance order that is made with an individual organisation. And we've been very clear in our consultation process that we of some of the challenges that these new standards, as they are shown to us presently, will present to us. So that's our negotiation point until that comes forward.
Right, thanks for that report, Anthony.
I'd like to welcome the report, but on a sort of a word of caution perhaps. I think it's necessary for us to continually emphasise to the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office the tough financial times that we find ourselves in as councils, struggling to get by and preserve vital local services. And I think, whilst we support efforts to bring about bilingualism, what we can do and what is pragmatic and proportionate to expect us to do as councils has to be viewed in that context. I'm pleased that you sort of hinted that the approach will be increasingly to work with us rather than against us as councils, and I'd hope that sort of spirit of partnership, as opposed to us just being wrapped across the knuckles when we do something wrong, is one that's taken forward. Because I think that's going to become increasingly important as you talk of sort of step changes in terms of expectations. We can either be worked with to try and bring about those raised expectations whilst recognising the financial realities of where we are, or it could work very differently. So I think that's just a point that we have to continually make, as whether we like it or not, and I certainly don't like it. The times we're in, having to save 10 tens of millions of pounds each year makes it very difficult when there's increased expectations across any area of regulation that are placed upon us as councils.
Good, I think we all agree with that point. Anybody else? Dave?
Yeah, following on from Councillor Hunt, in a sense, because I also welcome the report, and I think you're doing a good job, and I think we are providing what we need to be providing in a very efficient and effective way. But one issue you raised at the start, and that's when we fell foul of the Commission for the lack of duality in implementing the automated system. The customer services concern that we get it right before we roll it out, and there was a technical issue there as well. That's the issue that allowed us to fall foul of the Commissioner. And it seems to me that the logic of the Commissioner's stance in that sense was less a concern for increased costs and inconvenience to the service in general than actually getting the bureaucracy right. And as I said, following on from Councillor Hunt's point, with the kind of financial constraints that apply now, and indeed applied then as well, but they are even worse now. I hope we're not going to get into another situation where we fall foul of the bureaucracy because we are trying to work within certainly tight parameters in terms of the finances, and that has to be taken into consideration.
Thanks for that, Dave. Any other comments? John?
Yeah, Vincent, I'd like to think that there is an acknowledgement, certainly by the Welsh Language Commissioner, about what we have done so far. We're not where they would like us to be, but certainly we've certainly made some inroads in the last 12 months, 2 years, I think, and I hope there's some sort of acknowledgement from them, given what Anthony and Dave have said about our financial restrictions at this moment in time.
Anybody else? If not, sorry. Yes, Vince, go on.
Just to say, there's often a very formal approach that you have with the Commissioner because they are following the legislation, and they really want to be clear about that they are setting the compliance expectations. However, behind that there is a lot of informal recognition for the considerable progress that we've made, and we have that at officers' level, and we can actually see sometimes that their hand is being forced by a set of circumstances that often, my sense is that they prefer not to have done things that way. But certainly there's a very clear recognition of the amount of progress that we've made here, perhaps more so than within other councils.
Good, thanks for that. All agree the recommendation, Show? Thanks very much, Vince. I see you're on at the next item as well, which is the item 12, transfer of community assets. This is Mark Doubler. Well, I'm reading off a sheet, so if officers decide to change the names on the sheet, don't blame me on there, but this is what I'm looking at, which has just been done. Over to you, Mark.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. Let's get the right report up. The purpose of this report simply is to provide an update to Cabinet to consider the disposal of the former Upper Cwmbran Infant School site for less than best consideration through a community asset transfer. I'll just sort of run through the key messages rather than the full body of the report, really. This particular site was declared surplus by Cabinet in 2010, and at the time priority was given to exploring the viability of a community asset transfer for the site. We are in a position now where we've received an acceptable business plan from an organisation called Able Radio, which some of you may be familiar with. It's proposed then on that basis to undertake the community asset transfer based on the business plan that we've received by granting a full repairing lease to Able Radio for 30 years at a nominal rent. Clearly there are going to be other terms and conditions attached to that. They'll be negotiated in due course. There's some more detail on the structure of that particular arrangement at 5.11 in the report if you want further detail. I suppose one of the other key points that you need to bear in mind really are that there are sort of opportunity costs that Cabinet need to consider given the overall priorities and existing commitments within the approved capital programme. Essentially, by going with a community asset transfer on this particular site, you're foregoing a capital receipt or a potential capital receipt for the same site. So really, it was just to bring that to your attention. There are a couple of other points in the report that are probably just worth looking at, really. around the sort of the financial risks again associated with that and some of the legal complexities. But essentially, I'd just like to bring your attention to the action following decision, which is point 9 in the report. If you're minded to go with the recommendations, which I'll just sort of run through in a second, then these are really the steps that need to be taken following approval. And that's essentially that Able Radio will be informed of the Council's decision formally, and then colleagues in asset management will work with Able to come up with a lease that is sort of satisfactory to both sides, really. That's kind of the main crux of the report. So in terms of the recommendations, they're in 2 parts. And I'll read them out for you, which is that Cabinet determines whether to approve the community asset transfer of the former Upper Cwmbran Infant School through grant of a lease for up to 30 years for nominal consideration, noting that the opportunity cost of the community asset transfer is a potential capital receipt in the region of £300,000 from the sale of the site. And following on from that, that if the community asset transfer is approved, then Cabinet grants delegated authority to the Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer to negotiate details in terms of the lease in consultation with the Assistant Chief Exec for Communities and implement said transfer. Any questions?
Any questions? John? John is clapping, he's clapping, and he'll be clapping on the way out through the door as well. Go on.
Yeah, totally support this initiative, obviously, and thank Mark for taking it forward, because we did stall for some time on it, unfortunately, trying to get a group together. But there's tremendous amount of support for this in the community, tremendous amount of support. There's my political colleagues up in Upper Cwmbran. We have very little or no community facilities where we are. This is an opportunity for us to open up this facility to other voluntary sector organisations, and I think Able Radio themselves has something of a record of being able to attract funds and also provide a brilliant service. And I understand they probably provide a service for the council in some respects. So totally support this. Very happy at last, after this long deliberations, trying to get groups together, because I know there are many groups in our area who are looking for facilities to work from, and Able Radio now can provide that for us. So I would support the
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Anthony?
Just quickly also to welcome the report. It's great that Able Radio can use the building, and I think it's worth paying tribute to both Councillor Cunningham and Burnett for the years of work they've done trying to get a good community use into the facility. I would, without wishing to be the party pooper, like to, while supporting this report, sort of note a word of caution that this is a case that goes back a long way and is a special case in many respects, and we have to remember that there are other sites that are earmarked in order for us to be able to afford the new schools in 21st Century Schools programme. So we can't forego every capital receipt, even though we can on this occasion. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to afford to build the new and improved schools that we all want for our young people.
Thanks. Rich.
Can I just, on the other side of that, while I wholeheartedly support Councillor Hunt and what he said, we do need the receipts, and that's why it's right and proper that it came to Cabinet today, and if we weren't happy with it, we could have overturned the recommendations. But as Anthony said in his response to the Welsh language item, it is a time while we are financially in a position that we would rather not be in, but it allows us as a council to be an enabler and ensure those services are provided within our community. Here, Able Radio, who's currently in a social services facility, they've just outgrown it and are doing sterling work there, but they have outgrown it. Chris Caliog in Woodland Road, we're providing services there. So whereas we as an authority and the decisions that we're going to take in the forthcoming months are going to have to rein in some of the things we do, we can still be an enabler within our communities by allowing some of these go forward. Ever mindful, as Anthony said, that we do need money for our 21st century schools, but I think we're to be congratulated with that we can allow these services within our local communities, and whilst not providing them ourselves, enable others to do so.
Anybody else? If not, all agree. Oh, sorry, Dave.
What sorts of third sector organisations are Able Radio looking at to sublet part of the property?
They've been in discussions with at least two organisations that I'm aware of, although I suspect that one may have fallen away due to timing on this now, but they were looking at supporting the move of an organisation called CMIG, which I think provides sort of mental health type advice. And there was one other organisation, but as I say, I think that's kind of dropped off. So in terms of third sector trading organisations, then that's where they were. They were also looking to support more general kind of community groups and community activity as well.
Can I say on that? Obviously, that would be within the purview of Able Radio to manage that. I mean, it's not for us to start dictating to them who the users of that organisation would be. I'd rather the lead authority in that building they're going to be managing it, they're going to be funding it. Let them decide who they're going to use, who's going to use it with them. It has to be something, I suppose, which would be consistent with the service that they are providing. CMIG would be a good example, actually.
All agree with the report, please show. Thanks so much, Mark. We just cleared up some confusion in terms of calling down officers to report. All these reports are written by, in the main, senior officers. And they were written, I don't know, weeks ago, I suspect. But when you come to the Cabinet Day, many of those senior officers are not present. So other people have to give the report. For instance, in the previous one, which was item 11 on Welsh language, that was written by David Congreve and Alan Vernon-Jones. But the sheet I was coming in, I hope you're taking notice, Ed, says quite clearly Vincent James should do it. So there's a time lag between the report being written and the availability of officers to come and see there. So if I call the wrong name out, it's because I'm calling it off this crib sheet which have been prepared by officers to tell me that there's an alteration and there's an alternative officer giving the report. I hope that clears up the confusion, and I hope you're clear about that. Right, now then, let's go on to item 13, which, according to my sheet, is David Lilly.
Thank you, Leader. This report is the usual first quarter or month 4 report that gives a forecast of our financial position for the current financial year. Members will have to be reminded that these projections haven't yet occurred. They're only forecasts and projections for years, so they will change as we move through the financial year as the service management teams look to address any projected adverse variances that are included within the table at 5.1. Moving to the table at 5.1, that summarises the position we find ourselves in at month 4, so July forecast. It shows a net £1.3 million adverse variance, so if we don't do take corrective measures, the authority will overspend by £1.3 million. There are 4 particular areas I'd like to draw to your attention within that table. The resources position of £300,000 underspend. That's arisen primarily due to staffing reductions, a lower than anticipated but a level of actual take-up of DHP's discretionary housing payments than was budgeted, and again a small variance on underspend variance on the council tax reduction scheme grant. The second area is the community services area, which is shown as £127,000 overspend forecast. That primarily relates to 2 areas, one being a reduction in grant during the year from Coleg Gwent in relation to adult education classes, and the other is a delay in the transfer of the Woodland Roads Community Centre across to the third sector. The other area is showing a £396,000 adverse variance. That's masking a larger variance on one of the agreed mitigation measures that we set at March Council, which is in relation to the review of third-party spend on procurement and some non-employee spend across the authority. Disappointingly, there's been very little movement on that area, and only £9,000 of £600,000 has been identified as a saving. So that is shown as a substantial pressure in there. There are 2 other positive variances in there. One is in relation to the external audit fees that we have to pay to be scrutinised. That's underspending by about £85,000 at the moment, and there's also a one-off saving on a pensions budget that we set aside for the Torfaen Leisure Trust. That has now been incorporated within the pensions actuarial valuation. I suppose the substantial item in table 5.1 is the social care and housing, which is showing a £1.3 million adverse variance. That is a forecast which is outlined in 5.3.2. It covers all areas of the service are showing adverse variances. The children's services area is experiencing a spike in demand across its children, and there are a number of additional children that have to be placed outside in external placements and in secure accommodation, which will greatly exceed what we had anticipated at budget setting process. The secure accommodation, the demand there has increased by 100% over budget, so it's gone up to 10. And the external placements has increased from 44 to 51 during the year, so that's a 16% increase. So that being said, that's one aspect of the forecast. There is increased demand. The other aspect is non-achievement of approved savings, and again, they are outlined within there. With regards to taking the position forward for social services and housing, the service leadership team is looking at all aspects of the forecast, is challenging the assumptions that have been made in there, and is looking to bring alternative solutions to fore as we move through the year. It's also looking at its service-specific reserves that it holds on the balance sheet. It has just over £300,000 worth of uncommitted reserve, which is there ready and available to use. There are also other service projects that are there which could be decommitted and used to fund any deficit at the year end, should the deficit not be brought back in line. So that covers off the revenue forecast position. Moving on to paragraph 5.5, there's a table at the top of page 307 where I've tried to summarise the position we find ourselves in with the mitigations that we approved at March Council. We had to approve £7.1 million worth of mitigations, and that table tries to show where we are with those mitigations, ranking them within a risk. So you've got the various there. I've drawn out really the high mitigations, the high risk mitigations in the commentary earlier on the revenue budget. The next section of the report talks about the reserves of the authority. So it's a small table at page 307 at 6.3 on that page, which outlines the reserves, the general reserves of the authority, the school balances of the authority, and summarises the service area and the corporate reserves. General fund balance is broadly on line where we thought it would be, given the actual usage we projected, we built into the council tax setting report. School balances, again, is standing at about 4% of the school funding. Over the page then is a further analysis of the service balances and the corporate balances. Within there, as we expected, there's been a reduction on the service area balances to mitigate some of the pressures and for some specific projects. The corporate reserves, they are broadly static, and that's where we thought we would be on it, because we think that those reserves there and resources there will come more to the fray as we start looking at 15-16's budget and 16-17's budget. The next section of the report just touches very briefly on our capital programme. So at the top of page 309 is a summary of the capital programme and a commentary on how the capital programme has changed. The primary change has been slippage coming through from 13-14 into 14-15, which we didn't anticipate when we set the budget, and then a slippage into 15-16 in relation to the 21st Century Schools programme on the three primaries that we talked about earlier on the agenda. and that was mainly because of the late notification from Welsh Government of the award. That brings the presentation to an end, Chair, to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Dave. Let me bring in Anthony. Or stop. Yeah, let me bring in Anthony, then we'll have the question.
I don't really want to rehash what Dave just said, but this just shows the tight financial circumstances we're operating in. Obviously, there are issues that need to be resolved in year there, but I think at least we're drawing these things, and these things are being dealt with early in the year rather than at the end, so that we can come to a better position by the end of the year.
Right. Any questions now then to Dave?
Yeah, can I just ask you to clarify one, Dave, on the £396,000 adverse projection, or the current non-achievement of third-party budget savings, which is creating a pressure of £591,000. That must have an influence, I would think, on some budget headings. And could you put a bit of meat on the bone, what that means? I mean, I don't know what it means, actually, achieving a third-party budget savings. Obviously, that must be voluntary sector groups that we...
Sorry. Third-party budget spend is spend that we pay to other organisations, so any purchases we make, so any procurement activities that we undertake by the authority, so any spend that isn't employee-based. So where we're renting accommodation, where we've entered into contracts with suppliers to provide a service, it's renegotiating, looking at all those contracts. So that's the position we find ourselves in, where that hasn't been taken forward as yet.
Any other questions? No? If not, thanks very much. All agreed, the report show. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Leader. Morning, Cabinet. The report you have before you today really is requesting approval of a community environmental interventions policy and procedure that we developed over the last year, and has been subject to safer scrutiny and overview committee's views as well. By way of context, rather than going through the report, it's rather short, I'll just concentrate on the key measures and take any questions, Chair, if that's okay. The community interventions, really, what they are for the group, they are physical interventions that we put into the community when our primary interventions are not succeeding as well as we would normally expect them to proceed through our antisocial behaviour team. So such things as gating orders, chicanes, A-frames that we put in place as a supplement to the primary interventions that we undertake on a daily basis with our team based in the Community Safety Partnership. So by way of introducing this policy, it formalises our approach that when we need to use these interventions, we have a policy and a procedure that we can cover and can be open to members and the rest of the public for their guidance. The use of community interventions, they're certainly not commonplace. We have a very good response rate to our primary interventions process. But the only way sometimes that we can approach some of the difficult situations that we have in the community is through further interventions, and this policy brings all that together. So with that in mind, Chair, that's the gist of the report. It's to more formalise and have a more consistent approach in the way we adopt community interventions.
Very good. Any comments, John?
Yeah, so obviously some of these interventions are very successful on occasions, but can be very expensive and laborious. Let me just ask you a question, whether we are in partnership with our RSLs on this, because I remember some years ago when we used to have these interventions by placing up chicanes and barriers and different things, we tended to install them on some of our RSL properties. It meant that we were paying for them. So are you sort of in partnerships with this type of initiative that, should it be on an estate which belongs to one of our RSLs, that obviously they should be contributing?
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. The interventions that we've done in the past, I believe, are on actually our own council property, but we operate in a multi-agency approach with anything we undertake with antisocial behaviour. So we would be working in partnership with our RSL partners as well as the police and others in the community. Community interventions can be expensive, particularly if you're looking at gating orders. They can be anything up to £10,000. to implement. Certainly the way the expenditure that we've undertaken at the moment has been on council-maintained properties.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Grenada?
Thanks, Leader. Thank Linda for the report. I certainly welcome this because, as is right throughout the borough, antisocial problems are certainly on the increase. I've had 3 meetings this week relating to antisocial problems that are really affecting the lives of people in our communities. So something needs to be done. There's some interventions here that might be a possibility and might protect what we're trying to do, which is protect our communities. Because at the moment, it's just mayhem out there, and the misery that some people are having to go through. So this report certainly goes a long way in my book to try and resolve some of the issues that we are faced with in our communities.
Could I just respond to that second, Leader? The community interventions, Councillor Clark, they are the secondary to the primary interventions, and we only use them when we are really struggling to achieve the aims to the primary interventions that we undertake through our multi-agency problem-solving groups. But this policy brings around a further opportunity for us to take a more belt and braces approach to issues in the community.
Anybody else? All agree the report, Joe? Thank you, Lyndon. Item 15, which is accommodation moves and changes, which have raised a couple of hackles, I think, throughout the matter, but I'm sure Richard Edmonds is about to give us a full and frank understanding of it. Over to you, Rich. By the way, Richard is the man responsible for this sheet today.
I was just about to start, Leader, by saying I wrote this report and I was definitely supposed to be here to deliver it, so thank you for that. I'll just get the right report up on screen. Okay, thanks, Leader. This is really a report that allows me to highlight the work that's been going on over recent months around accommodation, particularly at the Civic Centre. The main drivers behind the work were the Senior Management Task Force's intention to deliver a transformation agenda and drive out costs, coupled largely with the fact that our colleagues in social care and housing based at police headquarters are currently in a temporary arrangement, and we'd like to move them to more permanent accommodation. Section 6 of the report sets out the highlights really in terms of the progress that we've made to date since this started back in March. The planned work, which will go on over the autumn and winter to see this project through to completion, and also some reference to the projected savings associated with the moves. In terms of progress, the moves to date have really centred on making way for social care colleagues to move up. So that's seen staff from the 5th floor move to a range of new locations that include the settlement, floor 4 of the Civic and floor 2. And those moves are now largely complete. You'll all no doubt have spotted the staff in what used to constitute the canteen and kitchen area. As of Monday, floor 5, with the exception of the leadership team space, essentially becomes a construction site. And works will be focused on creating the kind of layout which I've attached at Appendix 2. More remedial works will then be undertaken on floor 6 to make better use of the space up there, currently occupied by social care, but we'll get more people in than are there currently. And there'll also be a number of changes made over at the police station, which will allow us to, again, make better use of that space. So really the whole 140 people currently accommodated down at police headquarters will be accommodated in Pontypool, largely in the Civic, with some staff at the police station as of the end of this calendar year. We've also introduced a couple of other things like bookable corporate hot desks, which, you know, if there are occasions when you come in and there isn't a desk available, you can book and make sure that you can get access to the space to deliver your work. In terms of costs, Leader, the allocated capital and corporate accommodation reserve have supported what is pretty significant piece of construction work, and if you want to pop up onto floor 5 and have a look, you'll get a feel for the size and scale of it. The project's estimated to come in online in terms of budget spend and also on time in terms of the schedule for all staff to be out by the 31st of December. It would be remiss of me not to thank some specific colleagues who really have thrown their heart and soul into this. Jane Hughes in particular, who's project managed the whole thing, Also Adrian Jenkins from Neighbourhood Services, who's put up with a multitude of my last-minute changes to the arrangement. And also Caroline Jennifer-Jones, one of mine, who's literally thrown everything she's got at the moves from floor 5 down to floor 2. So that's a sort of breeze through the work that we've done, the work that will be done. Happy to take any questions, Leader, at that point.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. I think first of all, congratulations, because I think you're doing a good job. The whole exercise is about saving money and about sharing the responsibility. And I know there are people out there who feel that they've been hit worse than others and that they want certain places shut down and so on. But what you're trying to do is to spread the jam thin, isn't it? And I think you're doing, and your team are doing an excellent job. Anybody else want to?
Yes, certainly support everything that's been done. If we were having to deal with the kind of budget cuts that we are having, if we had to deal with that kind of thing in our own households, we would be doing the same thing, obviously on a much smaller scale. But people out there don't seem to realise the exact amount of money in cash terms, the cuts that this council is taking, and the moves that we are doing to reduce the amount of expenditure. It'd be worthwhile if we could get some kind of thing out into the public realm about how much money we're saving by not renting premises not belonging to us, to bring people into our own accommodation, thereby saving expenditure. Because there is a lot of ill feeling going out there, but it's generated, I think, by the lack of knowledge of how bad our budget cuts are and how much money we are saving by doing these exercises. Thanks very much, Rich.
Anthony?
And just off the back of that, to praise the staff who have been flexible enough to move from a situation where we're in somewhere as big as County Hall, and where we've tried to shrink back away from other premises that have cost us money to rent them back into those we have. I think it's been quite remarkable. And if you consider the alternative was building some gleaming edifice to the council, I don't think would have been popular with members or with the public. So I think it's worth sort of just praising those who have been involved with this work for avoiding that, basically.
Right, thanks for that. Anybody else, Dave?
Yeah, just one. Picking up on Councillor Jones's point about a lack of awareness, comprehensive awareness, that is, an understanding of the amount of money that we need to be saving just to, if you look, just to stand still in providing the services that we provide. But I don't think it's just a question of people not fully understanding. It's a question, and we have to accept this, it's a question of the fact that no one likes change, and when you start doing things with the best will and intention in the world to save the money that we need to save in order to continue to provide services, then some people are going to be really upset by this. And that upset and annoyance is necessarily to do only with a degree of lack of clarity on the amount of money that we are confronted with in terms of savings. So anything we can do to publicise, to make clearer to the people that we serve the state of the finances going forward, which is nothing at all to do with us. In fact, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Nigel Aurelius and his team in particular, because I think the way that they've husbanded and continue to husband the reducing resources that we have and managing those resources in a way that reflects very, very well on them, and I think they deserve a pat on the back. But picking up on Lewis's point, I think we should, if we can, put out into the public domain in a clear and concise way exactly the nature of the problem that we're confronted with, and then perhaps people will accommodate the change in a more sensible and measured way than currently might be the case.
I don't disagree with that, but last month's Torfaen talks, you couldn't have it more explicit than that, the difficulties that not only our council is in, but all sorts of other councils. And I've got to say that Torfaen talks was used by the WLG in order to prove the point to Welsh Government that we're in a terrible state, and if people don't sit up, then we're going to be in an even worse state. So there has been some good work done, and I think Anthony and Nigel constructed that, and also Ed, I suspect, constructed that front page of Torwin Talks, which was excellent. But I agree with David, if there's any other way that we can push it out again, go on, Ed.
Thanks, Leader. I just thought it would be helpful to remind members that there's a members' seminar next Monday, which we're hoping is going to allow us to highlight the budget engagement process, which will enable us to take publicly some of these messages, but also to highlight the size and scale of the challenges that lie ahead.
Good. Anybody else? If not, then all agree the report show. Thanks so much. Thank you, Ed. I think you're on again. Now on to item 16, rural development. I think this is Ed. Yeah.
This is one I hadn't intended to present, Leader, but...
Could I stop you there?
Yeah.
Just for the issue of clarity. I notice in the last couple of reports that I've read, we have an interloper in terms of the language that we're using. Brigade now seems to be flavour of the month. What precisely does this mean? We're brigading with... I have an understanding of what brigading means. I'm sure it isn't coincidental with the one that you were meaning, but perhaps you could...
I'll endeavour to do so. What I was going to say at the outset was it's personally disappointing for me that Rob has fallen ill, because this is a language that I don't speak particularly fluently, but I'll do my best through the course of the next couple of minutes to get across the key points, including the meaning of brigade. What this particular report relates to is the next rural development programme, which is scheduled to run from 2014 to 2020. It highlights the pretty significant programme level changes that have been brought about in relation to the way in which that plan is going to be rolled out and administered. You'll see from the report that the last round of RDP funding has brought some pretty successful projects to the borough, and we've achieved a lot, Llanrafan Manor being perhaps the most significant that's referenced in the paragraphs Rob's written. As Welsh Government and others have progressed towards this new round of funding, though, we've seen some pretty significant changes. There's a new methodology that's been rolled out to sort out local authority indicative allocations, so the amount of money that we are able to access. And in standalone terms, that sort of puts Torvine right at the very bottom of the pile in terms of the amount of money that it can expect to get hold of. The monies that are shown in the table on 4.6, I'll just put that up on onto the projector. These are essentially the indicative allocations. The percentages are a bit of a misnomer. What we're being told by Welsh Government currently is to focus on 5%. So the overall pot, for want of a better phrase, around RDP is 995,000 as far as Torvine is concerned. Now, that particular pot of money includes the lead body or secretariat costs, so the cost of actually administering the RDP here in Torvine would come off that. So we'd take around 300k away from that and be left with around 700 that would effectively be the project pot. In terms of the lead body or secretariat costs, those have also reduced as a result of the changes to the indicative allocations. And Welsh Government are encouraging local authorities to brigade, in essence, to work together to form a joint arrangement, for want of a better phrase, to oversee the rural development programme in the sub-region. We've had very positive exploratory conversations with Monmouthshire and Newport. Monmouthshire are exceptionally well versed in this particular territory. Newport are new to the arrangement, with a view to us brigading with them, sort of forming a sub-region with those two organisations. That would provide lead body and local action group costs, local action group direction for the whole of that area. So by doing that, the money that we talked about is given to the sub-region, and then the discussions and negotiations around how that gets spent within that area is managed by that group. We've also been talking to colleagues in neighbourhood services about the best location for the delivery aspect of the rural development programme. And at the moment we're looking at the Economy, Enterprise and Environment team as being a potential home for that, but I would stress at this stage that those conversations are in relatively early stages. In terms of the recommendations then, Leader, I guess what I'm asking Cabinet for this morning is permission to continue talking to Monmouthshire and Newport, but to do so on a more formal platform, to continue to progress conversations with neighbourhood services to that end, and to agree to the migration, should all of those things work out positively, of the lead body and the local action group direction to that new arrangement. Thanks.
Good, thanks for that. John, we've got to say that the word brigade is a term that has been foisted on local government by WEFO, with the organisation that manage European money coming into this country. So that's the answer there.
Well, I foresee this having Kazoos and glockenspiels. Can I just make the point, I'm glad that, that Ed did highlight the, within the recommendations, on the last recommendation, the Cabinet agrees that Torvine should, item 3, explore the possibility of migrating RDP project delivery responsible to neighbourhood services. Could I ask the Cabinet to consider, please, if we could reword that, explore subject to a further report the possibility of migrating, because there are financial risks involved with this particular recommendation, and because there's quite a bit of match funding. And the problem is, if there is no match funding forthcoming, where does that responsibility fall? So could I ask that we explore subject to a further report?
That's the reason for us doing what we're doing. In actual fact, they're reducing the RDP, and we have to make our mind up to either struggle on with a very limited amount of money that can do very little, or to brigade, as they say, with another authority. And our best chance is to go with Monmouth, who've been doing this sort of work because it's a rural economy for many, many years. The bottom line is that if we don't do what we're doing, then we'll have to give it up altogether, which would be silly, really, because there are benefits in it, albeit small. But what's happening here is that we are redressing the situation because WEFO are reducing the amount of money to local authorities.
Well, that's exactly my point. So that's why I'm asking if we could agree to subject to a further report, or explore subject to a further report to the Cabinet.
I'm absolutely fine with that. I think recommendation 3 is probably the least time sensitive of the recommendations before you. The brigading part of this, we need to have a sort of draft strategy in place by the 30th of September, and I don't think what Councillor Cunningham is asking for will preclude that. So it would be an internal issue, and I think it's also worth noting that although we're looking at around £175,000 in match funding, that can be brought in from a multitude of sources, and that is across the 7 years. So it's a smaller annual affair, but happy to bring a further report to that end.
Anybody else? If not all agreed, sure. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Leader. Very short one, this one, members. You'll no doubt recall the corporate performance assessment sessions that took place before recess. Both sessions I thought very useful, but also aware of the fact we ran them as a pilot with a view to refining and improving things as we move forward. That feedback and reflection has enabled a number of changes to be introduced to try and make the sessions much sharper. The proposed changes largely set out in section 6.1, but I think the two areas I'd like to draw members' attention to most are 616 and 617. In terms of 616, I thought it was helpful just to state the intended focus of the sessions as we move forward, which is really to understand the key issues that the organisation is dealing with, to drive progress through constructive but robust questioning, and also to provide early warning in relation to potential issues that lie ahead. I think it's worth making that statement explicitly, because that's our role, I think, moving forwards. In terms of 617, it's the other slight departure from that which went previously. Last time we used the corporate improvement objectives as the filter for assessing the health of each service area. It was raised at the session, I think, particularly by Duncan at the time, that certain service areas have less of an opportunity to show their health, as they don't necessarily feature as much as others in that particular process. So we're suggesting this time that each chief officer, combined with the relevant executive member, agrees a set of tracking indicators that will form the basis of those sessions for each service area. and then depending on whether we have identified an issue or we believe there's something underlying that should be explored, we will feature some of those tracking indicators in the discussions and not feature others. So the importance, I think, as I mentioned to members previously, we give enough time to the key issues so that the key issues can be explored and discussed, and that we are all in a position where the session focus can be played out. The example dashboard set out in the appendices just bring to life a couple of examples from education. It is draft, it's just designed to give a flavour for what the next set of data will look like. But at this stage, I'm seeking Cabinet endorsement to progress the corporate performance assessment development as outlined. Thanks, Leader.
Good. Any comments? Rich?
I think the new approach will prove successful. You rightly say from it we've learned things. In the past, John, myself, and more lately David has done these as individual corporate governance executive members. I think it is appropriate that there is a corporate whole cabinet approach. I think those couple of days proved that, and now that all cabinet members are aware of the circumstances, it's right, exactly as you say, to hone down, because there was a lot of information. We did have to cut through the chaff, for want of a better expression. I can't work brigade into this this particular example, and I think it's beholden now on all of us as executive members to work with our chief officers to look at those tracking indicators and go forward. So I know Sue is relishing as much as my good self to have a session looking at those ready to bring to the new system.
Good. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was very useful, actually, those sessions we had. But what came across to me, I felt that, and you may have a different opinion, that a lot of our time is taken up with some local indicators, which are totally meaningless. And I'm just wondering whether we ought to be looking at some of them. Some of our officers, spend a lot of time looking at local indicators, which doesn't really mean too much to us. And whether that could be adjusted. I don't know. There may be technical reasons why you can't do that.
No, not really. I think the important thing is that particular session looks at the key indicators, whatever those indicators are. There may be some very relevant local indicators. I think Councillor Daniel suggested the inclusion of one at the last session that we might want to focus on. But really the challenge now is for the Chief Officer and Executive Member to get a balanced set of tracking indicators that almost at a glance will give you an indication of the health of a service. And that's going to, I'm sure there'll be some interesting discussions around what those indicators should be. But I think we shouldn't lose sight as well that whilst we've got some tracking indicators, there may well be some other things that are underlying, the sort of anecdotal knowledge that we pick up through discussions across service areas that may just be useful in terms of giving us that early insight into a potential issue downstream. So there's no reason why it can't happen. And I guess my words would be, choose as wisely as possible at this stage, but we're not wedded again to what you choose now being a fait accompli for forevermore. Things can change.
Dave?
Yeah, just a small comment. I believe that what you're referencing or what we're seeing in this is moving in the right direction. I'm sure you would agree with me that it isn't. This isn't a destination. This is a process we're working through, and we will continue to work through it and improve it. And hopefully, it will begin to be able to bite as well as bark in terms of the work that we have to do. I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction, but there is still some room for improvement on this as well, isn't there?
Good. All agreed. Please show. Thanks very much. That's the last item, so I'll close the meeting. Thanks very much.